Well, we are about 4 minutes past. I don't want to hold up anyone too long since I know time is precious, especially as we dive into this virtual world. It's harder to add more virtual time into the day, so we will be cognizant of that for everyone. My name is Victoria Castor. I am the Water Conservation and Sustainability Coordinator for the City of Peoria. And hello and welcome to our very first sessions, kind of town hall style, about our upcoming sustainability plan. We are excited to kind of offer these events and begin to glean some information and some insight to our communities through these different topic areas. I do want to mention that we are recording this, so feel free, if you're not comfortable, you can turn your video off, and you can use our chat as well. Those are open and ways that we are monitoring that we can get your feedback there. I want to also introduce ASU. So we are partnering with ASU's Project Cities. They are helping us with this amazing setup here and hosting these 4 different listening sessions. And I'm also working with 4 amazing graduate students through the Project Cities group, as they are helping me not only with this engagement process, but also with some of the background work for this phase of our sustainability plan. So I'd like to introduce Kayla, who is one of our students, and she's kind of manning the host and the technicalities of this meeting. We also have Casey, Lauren, Lanessa, and then we have Stephen as well, who's the Project Cities manager, who's kind of our technical guru tonight as well. So I thank you all so much for joining us and for being a part of this for Peoria. So before I jump into our first category, I first kind of want to highlight a little bit of background as to the past sustainability plan and then how we're hoping to change this for the new one, the one that we're working on now. Peoria had their first sustainability plan released back in about 2012, and it had been updated in 2016, kind of some minor updates, but it really hasn't had an overhaul for that long period of time. And so this new plan, our hope is to really kind of redo the sustainability plan and to do it a little bit differently. And by that, we really want this to be a community-driven document, and we want it to be a living plan. So it's not just something that sits on the shelf. This is something that there's constant engagement and updates, and really kind of, we want the community to have some ownership of this plan and this process. So to do that, what we have done is kind of created, it's almost like a grassroots framework. So we are reaching out to you, the community, first, before we really create this plan. So we want to hear your ideas and your vision for what sustainability is in Peoria for you within our 8 topic areas. And we want to take all that insight that you provide us and build the plan from that input. So really, this is a community-driven plan because we're taking your input and your ideas, and that's what we're building the plan from. So we're super excited to use this method. We're excited to have engagement throughout the process and to continue to work with the community as we move forward with sustainability. Next slide. So our first topic we are going to touch on today is natural systems and community forestry. Next slide. So how I'll cover each of these topics is I'll kind of go through the description and the different goals, I call them example goals, that we have for the topics that kind of helps give some clarity and some ideas to things that fit within the category. And then I'm going to introduce some amazing staff that are experts in these particular topics. And they are going to be here to kind of guide us and answer any questions that you may have in the topic areas as well. So I'll do that for each of our categories. And then in between, we're going to have some open sessions so that you guys can provide some insight or ask any questions that you may have. So to get started, we have natural systems and community forestry. And this is to provide exceptional outdoor opportunities to recreate, connect with nature, and build community while supporting a healthy environment through its natural lands, parks, trail system, and proactive management of trees. And our example goal for that would be explore and adopt tree shade canopy coverage goals and protections that are appropriate to our climatic conditions, which improve the quality of life and positively affect the environment throughout the city. So the second example goal we have is to provide resources to aid community development and the preservation of sensitive environment of the Sonoran Desert. So we live in a very unique area and we want to recognize that. And then positively affect long-term ecosystem health and provide unique recreational opportunities. So there's one thing, as I introduce staff, but one of our staff members is also going to kind of explain what a new term is that we have here today, and that is community forestry. This is a term that we are going to hear about more frequently in Peoria, and so I'll give a staff member, once I introduce them, a chance to kind of explain what that is for Peoria as well. But first, I'll introduce I think if Lou has joined us, I'm not sure if she's joined us, but it's Lou Brannick, who is our development plan reviewer. So she deals a lot with the development side of our open space. We have Ryan McCarthy, who is our landscape coordinator and also an arborist. And then lastly, we have Brandon Putman, who is our landscape contract coordinator and arborist. And he's the one that is going to kind of explain in a little bit more what community forestry means in Peoria. Go ahead, Brandon.
Thank you, Victoria. Hi, as Victoria said, my name is Brandon Putman. I am acting city arborist and oversee our landscape contracts throughout the city of Peoria. One of the unique concepts that is found within a lot of other municipalities, but is a little unique to the Arizona desert climate, is the concept of community forestry. Community forestry is comprised of the trees and the vegetation within our urban areas, and they have a special relationship to people. They provide environmental services such as shading and cooling properties. They also provide wildlife habitat. They clean the air of pollutants, and they also slow down our stormwater runoff. The majority of Peoria's community forestry is located on private property, but this also includes the trees in and along neighborhood parks. Sorry, I just lost. Sorry about that. I had a little glitch. These trees can also be found along our neighborhood parks, our street trees, our landscaped parkways, retention basins, washes, greenways, and nature preserves. So they're basically all of the trees that exist throughout Peoria's boundaries. And this large number of urban trees greatly contributes to Peoria's ecosystem, sustainability, and community well-being. So what we are looking to do with a community forestry program is create a culture of stewardship that focuses on resources in high priority areas, such as those parks and street trees and landscape parkways, and as well as some community engagement, which is what we're doing here tonight. Our hope for a municipal forestry program will assist citizens with tree and landscape issues, support developers on the tree species and age diversity, and foster any partnerships with nonprofits or local businesses that exist within our community in order to increase our tree canopy. So that's just a real quick synopsis on what community forestry is and what we're hoping to bring to the city of Peoria.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brandon. We appreciate that. So with kind of that clarity on that new topic, you can go to the next slide. And we will open up the floor for any ideas or inputs or questions that might be out there about natural systems and community forestry. And so remember, you guys can unmute yourselves, also type in the chat. And we're also going to be using a really unique feature called Whiteboard, where we actually will get to kind of real time write out and kind of show the engagement and the ideas that you all are showing. And so we're going to be using that system today as well. So give us a moment as we kind of switch gears into that other website. And hello to those that joined us more recently. You missed the introduction. We're just starting in on our first topic, which is natural systems and community forestry. And we are about to kind of open up the floor to hear your ideas or visions of how that looks sustainably in Peoria. If anyone has any questions or comments, we can take them now while we also figure out the whiteboard system. It's always tricky when you switch from one tech to another. Feel free to unmute yourself, or again, feel free to type in the chat box as well.
Does anyone, when you think about forestry, does anyone have a hard concept or hard to recognize the use of the word forestry within the Arizona desert? Does that terminology kind of throw anybody off in the meeting here tonight?
That's a good question. There we go. Let's switch to our whiteboard. So when I think of forestry, of course, I think of your traditional forest, and the desert definitely does not fit that picture. But when you say community forestry, I think you think a little bit more closer to home. So then you kind of narrow it down to the local forest. Does anyone else have any thoughts or ideas, or if that's kind of how they also view that term, or if forestry should stay in the actual national forest?
I'm from the Midwest, and when I first came down here in 2002, to me, same thing, like the word forest was definitely pine trees, tall trees, but I really have adjusted now that I'm down here. I still try to use like desert landscape or something, though. It's like forestry is not the first word that comes to mind. But I also think that forestry means way more than just the trees and everything. It's like a whole process, I think.
Okay, so you kind of see it as the whole ecosystem that exists within a forest. Okay.
Interesting enough, even the Saguaro National Forest and some of these other national forests in Arizona are still using the term forestry, even though it's still our desert for sure.
That's the saguaro, the tree of the desert.
Right. Chat here. All right, so if we kind of take a step back and we talk about the goals that we have laid out. So an example goal that we had for this. Oh, Caitlin, more. For me, community forestry in Peoria definitely means the natural Sonoran desert, cacti and such, but also our wildlife as well. That is a wonderful point. And wildlife, of course, is near and dear to our hearts here in the desert. They've got to be thrifty. I mean, our native wildlife has to be tough cookies to be able to manage what they do. And so trying to provide them as much protection, I think, as we can is always one of our main goals as well. And Brandon, do you have anything to add to that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What about shade? So we've kind of toyed with the idea of because community forestry may not really fit, because we think about the ecosystem involved in the forest, and we talk about cacti, which aren't technically trees. We have put some focus towards community shade and thoughts about terming it that way, but obviously we have shade provided by trees and also shade provided by structures. So when we talk about canopy coverage in a traditional sense in the Midwest, like Debbie, where you're from, that's the amount of tree shade that is being covered over our asphalt and concrete surfaces. So obviously shade's a big deal here in Arizona. And so does tree shade kind of make more sense to you guys instead of the word terminology forestry?
It's a good question as well, especially with this horrible summer that we just got out of, shade and these areas that are precious. You can tell by a parking lot, anywhere there's a tree or any shade, those are the spots that, of course, go first, because we all know how much you cook just to be out in the elements, of course, in our summers. So that's a valuable question. Do we prefer tree shade, or are we open to more of the structured type shade?
Right. And I think that ties a little bit into natural systems, where Debbie, to your point about an ecosystem, that's the natural systems, which is the other area of open space protection that this goal is striving to attain.
Brandon, being as though, the shade initiative in Peoria is an important thing. We're trying to create as much shade for, gatherings of people and some of those things. That seems to be something that, is there a target for like a density as far as the number of trees in the city, and how do we compare to our peers in the rest of the valley when it comes to that? And being as though we're mindful of water conservation, how does that aspect play into ensuring we have enough shade to meet the initiatives that we're after from a community gathering standpoint, but also being conscious of water?
Absolutely. That is kind of one of those big concerns for us as well. The term community forestry makes a lot of sense in the Midwest, on the East Coast. And that's where, trying to look at other municipalities and how they have used the terminology in the past and how that relates to the desert. The key point that I think transitions are the conversation about tree shade is when we lay down a road, when we construct buildings, is it still truly the desert? And are we now working with a urban environment in which we have hardscape surfaces, the asphalt, the concrete, and the shading that needs to occur in those walkable spaces? And then, that's mixed with, what are water resources in order to maintain those trees? And Peoria sits right around 6.5% tree shade, based on our last tree inventory. To our peers, that's about right in line with the Phoenix and Scottsdale. When you go even up to Flagstaff, which is in the forest, they're looking more at the 25% tree shade coverage, because again, you have the urban environment that these trees are intermixed with.
Jump in here, Steve, do you have a question, Steve Roth?
I do, thank you. The statistics I just heard was for the city of Phoenix. Last year, the average temperature was 77.7 degrees, the second hottest on record. And it made me think of a question for you, which is the heat island that is being developed in the valley with all the construction. To what extent does Peoria require developers not only putting up housing divisions, but also navigating that road to where they have to put a percentage of planting or trees so that we don't exacerbate the heat island in Peoria?
Great question.
That's why we want to put, through this sustainability plan, one of our goals is to help with the developers, not just plant a lot of trees. Our zoning ordinance does have stipulations on the number of trees that need to be planted as part of a new development. What is not regularly considered, however, is trees as infrastructure, providing those heat island effect abatement, as you described, Steve. And so we want to see and put forth more protections of existing mature trees. The Council of Landscape Appraisers can put a value to a large mature tree that is providing air pollution, cleaning, stormwater runoff, and actually put a quantitative number to what that tree's value is, to where if the developer comes in, cuts down that tree, are we really recouping the benefits that were lost by cutting down a 40-foot tree and replacing it with a 6-7 foot tree in its place? So we do have the Desert Lands Conservation Overlay, which is another zoning ordinance that does attempts to try to preserve those mature tree species and the natural urban environment or the natural desert environment. But as developments get changed over and we may see a restaurant be converted to a bank or something like that. How can we protect those mature shade trees during construction in order to retain that community benefit? So those are the pieces that we're looking at, creating those canopy coverage goals in order to mitigate that heat island effect that you're describing. Does that answer your question?
Yes, very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Perfect. We do got to wrap up the Q&A portion for the natural forestry section.
So is there any other comments anyone has before we move on to the next group? Again, feel free to type in the chat or to unmute yourself. There's also an email that I'll provide at the end. So if you think of something that didn't get brought up today, you are more than welcome to send whatever ideas or comments to us via email, and we are glad to include that into our data analysis and our collection as well. So we'll just pause for about 30 seconds to see if anyone else has a question. Oop, did someone have something to say?
We're hearing you. Go ahead. Okay, we were hearing someone. And I think I heard, am I getting through? We were hearing that. I didn't catch who was speaking though.
Okay. So looks like there's one other question on the chat. Is how well do you think the city does currently in stewarding and caring for the natural environment in our community? So for our residents that we have attending, do you think that Peoria does a pretty good job at trying to be good stewards of our desert environment? Or do you see that there's a lot of room still for growth, or anything that sticks out in particular that you've noticed in your communities? I'll give just a moment for anyone to unmute or type if they need.
If there's no other questions, can I pose something to pick up on something Brandon mentioned about mature trees maybe providing more benefit? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So trees are one of the few things within our world that actually appreciate in value as they become older. So when we start with a 24-inch box tree from the nursery planted along a sidewalk, for example, or within a park, there's not a lot of leaf surface to it. The trunk is not quite as big. It's not quite as tall enough for somebody to sit underneath and read a book. So as we nurture and care for that tree, provide proper pruning, provide adequate irrigation, or the right type of irrigation, and care for that tree over the course of its life, as it grows, we have more leaf surfaces that get developed. Those leaf surfaces trap those air pollutants, absorbing that carbon sequestration within its wood, and also mitigating that heat. So it's casting a larger shadow onto the ground beneath it, to where people could sit underneath it to watch watch a ball game, or watch their son's soccer team, or read a book, for example. So there's some intrinsic values that some can be quantified, some can't be quantified. But as that tree grows larger, more and more of that air pollution cleaning occurs, more of that storm water retention occurs. And so that's why protecting mature species from construction and other human impacts helps retain those highest value trees within our landscape, and recognizing that there is that high value to that mature tree, and that it can't readily be replaced with another 24-inch box from the nursery. We basically start back at scratch as we were 25 years ago. So that's why we're trying to place a priority on protecting our mature tree species, because they have such a high value to the community.
That's a great reminder and kind of illustration as we move forward as well. So thank you so much for kind of that in-depth explanation. Being cognizant of everyone's time, we are going to go ahead and move on to the next category. So Kayla, if we could switch back to the PowerPoint. And then we go to the next slide. So now we're going to cover the topic, community health and wellness. Next slide. So community health and wellness. Provide resources and encourage residents to be engaged and connected to create a socially inclusive community where physical and mental health, social well-being, and the environment are valued and supported. So some examples of goals that would fit into this categories are offer multiple classes and educational opportunities for mental health and human services, and then promote and encourage program growth that focuses on neighborhood engagement, affordable housing, efficiency, and community building in Peoria. So our staff expert is Debbie Pearson, and she is our let me open up my folder here, I had to write it down. So human services coordinator with our neighborhood services group, and she is our expert in this area. Debbie, feel free to add any comments you have before we dive into our community open, I guess you could say open floor.
Well, I just wanted to say that what's nice is I stepped into this role in 2013. And one huge change that is happening with the city is all of us like coordinating our efforts better, realizing that together, each division, whatever we do, kind of works in sync, and how can we make that work better together? And I think for the longest time, like the human piece was left out. People forget that you can't have any of your other programs or anything else unless you have a healthy human being. And so with the city, we take like really great efforts to figure out what is that need. We do all these reports and charts and graphs where I get information that is, data driven, but then we also reach out to the community. And what's great is we're reaching out more and more and more via just pop-up events, via surveying the community, because we want to know, are you guys healthy out there? If you're not, what can we do? Do you need more food services? Do you need, are you in crisis? Do you know where to go if you are in crisis? Now the city has a beautiful community assistance resource center that is right in our community center where people can go to get services. So it's like now that full element is being tied into all these other programs. And it's like, well, how does that relate to forestry? Well, all of these things tie in together to make the wellness of the community whole, to make sure that all things are being addressed for the enjoyment and fulfilling life for our residents. So.
That's a great point. Thank you so much, Debbie. And that also ties into the heart of sustainability. It has three legs. It has our social leg, our environmental leg, and our economic leg. And when you pull one of those legs out, you're not ever really truly sustainable. And so that's why it is so important to make sure that everything is interconnected, especially under that sustainability umbrella, and making sure that we're highlighting all those areas. So definitely appreciate that. Okay, next slide. And then we're opening it up to our community members for any comments or questions, ideas for actions or areas of growth that you see maybe needed in Peoria in this area. We're switching back over, so give us a moment as we switch text again. All right, we've got the clean slate. So does anyone have any thoughts so this is also a new category for our sustainability plan. So if anyone is familiar with our old plan, we didn't really highlight the human and the kind of social aspect as much. So as you just said, right, we're all circling it back in even more. And so that's why we definitely wanted to call it out in this version and make sure that we're tying all those things in together. And so this is a new area for us to kind of have its own action and goals in the sustainability plan. And we're kind of excited to see where our Peoria residents, our community kind of sees as important areas within this topic. So see, Lanessa, are there any unmet needs in Peoria that affects your health and wellness as residents? Is there something you would like to see implemented? So that's a good kind of question posed back to our community members. I have gotten the honor of being a part of a couple of these events that Neighborhood Services and Human Resources have put together, and it's amazing to see, especially this year, the need for these programs has been so great. And the outpouring that Peoria has just been able to really include and really buffer up these programs because the needs were much higher. And so it was great to be able to have conservation be a part of some of these events and these program offerings through this year as well.
I think this isn't really a question, but more of just like a comment kind of. I work at a local nonprofit, Bloom 365. We're at the Community Assistant Resource Center. But something that stands out for me, and I'm so glad that this is going to be included in the new plan, is youth and young people. And how can we get young people involved, especially when it comes to resources and accessing those resources. So that's something that kind of stands out for me, especially working with young people and recognizing the very, very needed mental health resources and all of that. So I love that this is a part of this plan. And I think finding ways to connect with kids all the way as young as kindergarten up to high school, I think is really important.
Thank you. And that is a great point, is youth programs and with mental health as well. There's many different, we offer youth programs in a lot of different areas, but making sure that the youth is aware of some of these resources as well. So this is a wonderful thing to highlight.
Yeah, that's the type of thing that we try to have that balance at the resource center. That's why we do the outreach and the surveying. The nice thing at the resource center too is the cross referring that that the agency staff members do with each other. A resident might go in for one service, but upon talking further, it'll end up they'll have some other unmet needs that the agency in the next cubicle over can just pop in, or they exchange phone numbers if they're not there on the different staffing days. So it's nice to have a fuller range of services to offer on the spot.
So Steve posted a question. Are there any social workers who can intervene if necessary, especially in a COVID environment?
Can you say it again?
Yes, so the question is, are there social workers who can intervene if necessary, especially in this COVID environment where we know things have kind of escalated? So does Peoria work with social workers who can intervene if they come across a case or a situation where there might be a need?
That's where that cross-referring comes in. So usually like with the youth organizations, they will, like Caitlin will already know resources that she'll have. But if somebody came into me, then I might turn around to Caitlin and say, can you help this person? So it's depending on what the need is. We'll find the resources within the center, or if they're not in the center, then we resort to the community resource guide and all of our other 200 plus nonprofit partners to see if they have the service that person is looking for. And yes, we do have good partnerships with some mental health agencies.
And great question, Steve. Thank you. Peruse here. Any other ideas or actions or unmet needs that you might see within our community? I know that when COVID started, our city did a phenomenal job at helping businesses. So it's not just our residents, but we very much pride in our local businesses. And I know that our folks were able to do some remarkable things a lot quicker than a lot of other cities to be able to try and offer aid to our businesses. So something I wanted to kind of put out there as well. See, Caitlin has another, absolutely what Debbie said. I believe Peoria Unified School District has also ramped up their social work and staff and interns. Yeah. It has been an interesting and rough year for all of this. And so it's made, I think, highlighted the need to have these resources available, and also highlighted the wonderful work that, that's already been done in trying to make these things available to our residents. But as always, we are always looking for ideas and ways that we can do better at making sure that these resources are getting to the people in need. Okay, I will wait 30 more seconds and see if there's any other comments. I don't want to hold anyone for too long. But I also don't want to cut anyone off on accident either. So we'll wait about 30 seconds and see if any other comments or ideas are coming through.
I just wanted to add one last thing. Again, I'm thinking of this from the youth lens because that's who I work with mostly, but I think this really just applies for everyone in our community, is meeting people where they're at, and using that as kind of a jumping off point to get them to the community resource center, to get them to the library, and all of those other amazing places that we have within our community.
That's a great point. Okay, wonderful. Well, if there's not anything else, I don't want to rush in. Okay, let's type in the notes in. So I'll let her finish there. So that way I'm not cutting anyone off short. All right, so I think if we're done with this, we can switch back to the PowerPoint and we'll go ahead and close up and everyone gets to get out a few minutes early, right? It's always exciting. It's kind of like getting out of school 15 minutes early. You take what you can get. All right, so we're on to our next step. So what comes next in this process? We are going to finish hosting the next 3 town hall sessions. So again, we have 8 different topics within the sustainability plan, and each of our events will cover 2 topics. So we encourage you to check out the topics and register for some of the other sessions, hear what folks are saying, and of course, we want you to add to the conversation. We're happy to get all the ideas we can. In the next few weeks, we will have an online survey that will be released. We're also going to have a PDF version, so folks that want to do online, they can of course send it in. We hope to have that in Spanish as well, so we'll be able to reach as many folks as we can. So look for that here soon. Once we have finished the survey and all of these town hall events, so the events will end in January. We're going to have the survey, the online survey will be live through February. So we've got a nice time frame that we're giving folks to take the survey and to provide extra feedback. There's also some gift cards. There's a raffle. So if you fill out the survey, right, you enter to win some goodies. So there's an extra carrot to take our survey. We hope to have all of this outreach and kind of data gathering completed by early March. And then that gives us some time to then begin to draft plan goals and an outline once we have completed gathering this information. So those are our next steps. I encourage everyone to stay engaged in this process and to please join us for these other town hall sessions that are coming up. One way that you can stay engaged is that we have a sustainability newsletter that just went live this week. You can go to the website that's there on the top and register for the newsletter. And it's only going to be 1 email once every month or 2. It's not going to flood your email box at all, but it's going to provide updates to where we're at in the sustainability plan, as well as conservation, water conservation and sustainability tips that kind of work seasonally, and then educational opportunities that we're going to have as well. So the newsletter will just highlight some of those fun and interesting things. As I mentioned previously, if you think of other things that you want to provide us, so insight on these 2 topics or the others that we have lined up in the plan, please feel free to send any more ideas or thoughts you have to our email below. That is conservation@peoriaaz.gov. We're happy to take any input that is received through the email and add it to our list in our database, so to speak, of things that we are getting from the community. With that being said, thank you so much for joining us today. I understand taking an hour out of your evening in this virtual world is extra hard, and so we really appreciate your time and your interest and your commitment to Peoria and sustainability. Again, we are just excited to be able to glean a little bit more in depth what our community feels is important. And we just appreciate you taking the time to join us today. So with that being said, I will send you all off to have the rest of a wonderful evening. Thank you.